Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Our first story today dives into the downfall of a high-performing solar office that went from thriving to shut down, all because a massive corporation thought endless meetings were more important than actual work. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Corporate micromanagement destroyed an entire solar office. Several years ago, I worked for a small solar company that was eventually swallowed up by what is basically the Walmart of solar. Huge, corporate, painfully inefficient, and obsessed with micromanagement. Before the takeover, our work rhythm made sense. We had weekly in-person meetings, scheduled at times that worked for both management and the field staff. Communication was tight, organized, and respectful of everyone's time. Then the acquisition happened, and suddenly the corporate overlords descended with their process improvements, which is corporate speak for, we're about to make your life miserable. Our reasonable 2 to 3 short meetings per week exploded into daily check-ins, weekly department calls, mandatory regional calls, and random alignment sessions no one asked for. What used to total maybe an hour or two per week turned into 8 to 10 meetings, each running 45 minutes to an hour. It felt like we spent more time talking about work than actually doing it. This would have been annoying in a normal office job, but my role was about 20% office, 80% field work. I was responsible for hitting 5 to 6 job sites per day, many of them an hour or more away. There was zero room in that schedule for endless meetings. For a while, I did what I could. If I was already on the road, I'd skip a call or listen quietly on mute while actually getting things done. As long as I technically joined, I could keep working. Of course, that didn't last. Management eventually pulled me into a reprimand and told me I had to fully participate in every single call. Not just listen, talk. And if I was in the field, I needed to park somewhere and do the meeting from there. They were dead serious about it too. Participate or get written up. Fine. They wanted participation, they'd get participation. From then on, whenever a call started, I immediately pulled into the closest parking lot, killed the engine, and sat there like a diligent little corporate soldier. Didn't matter if I was 45 minutes from my next appointment or halfway up a mountain road, meeting meant stop working, sit still, and talk about productivity instead of actually being productive. Meanwhile, the company refused to approve overtime, so the moment a meeting pushed my schedule back too far, that was it. The remaining sites didn't get done. I'd head back to the office, reschedule, and repeat the next day. Shockingly, and I say this dripping with sarcasm, productivity in our region plummeted by nearly 60%. After a month of this disaster, our regional manager flew in demanding to know what the hell happened. We told her plainly, you buried us in meetings. We can't work if we're stuck sitting in parking lots talking about work. If you want metrics back where they were, cut the useless calls. To her credit, she actually listened. They slashed some of the meetings, things improved slightly. But once the big company fully took over, the real chaos started. More policies, more micromanaging, more hoops, fewer tools, less support. Everyone was burnt out, and eventually every single one of us quit. That office, which once had the second best metrics in the entire company, officially closed because they couldn't replace us. They couldn't replicate the quality or the quantity of work we did. They never understood that we succeeded in spite of corporate interference, not because of it. Meetings didn't kill that office. Corporate arrogance did. Ain't that the truth? Management always wants us running around like chickens with our heads cut off, but hey, props to you for standing up and making them see reason. It's frustrating how meetings can drain productivity and morale, but it's encouraging to see people stand up for what they believe in rather than just endure nonsense. And our second story. Hey you, bring me a coffee, quick! I didn't plan to become the kind of woman who wins negotiations with a smile and a spreadsheet, but life has a way of handing you the keys while the engine's already running. My dad, Bill, built our company from a dusty warehouse, a Rolodex, and a stubborn refusal to be outworked. We sell industrial machine tools, CNC mills, lathes, cutting systems, the beautiful expensive monsters that keep American manufacturing alive. It's not a glamorous business. It's a business of tolerances you can measure in microns and customers who don't have time for nonsense. And my father was a wizard at it. The secret sauce wasn't just his knowledge, it was relationships. Over 30 years, he negotiated exclusive and semi-exclusive arrangements with suppliers in Germany, Japan, and a handful of U.S. specialty fabricators. The kind of deals that made competitors mutter his name through clenched teeth. Better lead times, better pricing, better warranty terms, the sort of leverage you can't fake with slick marketing. I grew up in that world. While other kids were collecting baseball cards, I was collecting catalog specs. I spent summers in the warehouse learning the difference between a salesperson who knew the product and one who merely knew how to talk. By 25, I could quote our margin structures and explain why one supplier's spindle design aged like fine wine while another's aged like milk. Dad loved it. He used to say, "Some people inherit money, you're inheriting the playbook." By 32, I was co-owner, not as a ceremonial title, but because Bill's health started to wobble. It wasn't a dramatic movie-style collapse. It was more insidious than that. A string of bad blood pressure days, fatigue that didn't match his stubborn willpower, a doctor who finally said the words Dad hated most, "You need to slow down," which is how I ended up attending a high-stakes negotiation with an overseas buyer while my father stayed home trying to pretend he wasn't scared. This was a big deal. A foreign manufacturing group wanted to place a large order, 7 machines in the first wave, with a broader multi-year expansion if the install went smoothly. Not just a sale, but a potential anchor relationship. We arranged the meeting at our headquarters in the Midwest. We also brought in an international legal specialist to handle the cross-border compliance, warranty jurisdiction language, and all the fine print that keeps grown adults from crying into their coffee. Ironically, coffee became the theme of the day. The buyer didn't come in person. They sent their U.S.-based representative, a man named Samuel. Samuel was about 40, sharply dressed, and carried himself like he'd been born leaning on a conference table. He had the confident swagger of someone who rarely meets consequences in the same room where he makes bad choices. The moment he walked in, he looked past me, literally past my face, like I was part of the office furniture. Then he smiled. Not a professional smile, not even a polite one. More like a man who thinks he's charming because no one has ever told him he's not. "You must be the assistant," he said, offering a hand that was just a little too slow, just a little too familiar. "I'm Samuel. Lucky me." "I'm Claire," I said, shaking his hand firmly enough to remind him I wasn't made of sugar. "I'll be leading the meeting today." He blinked twice, then laughed softly like I'd made a cute joke. "Sure you are." I worked in manufacturing long enough to know the difference between skepticism and condescension. This was the latter, gift-wrapped in cologne. We got into the conference room. I had our proposals printed, pricing scenarios lined up, a clean timeline for delivery and installation, and an option sheet I knew would make our offer look excellent even to a buyer who wasn't particularly bright. Samuel didn't look at any of it. He looked at me. "Well," he said, sinking into a chair like he owned it, "your boss around?" "My father isn't feeling well today," I said evenly. "I'm his co-owner, and I handle our procurement and pricing strategy." He tilted his head as if evaluating whether I was old enough to drive. "Uh-huh." Then came the comments. "Oh, they're hiring models for machine sales now." "You got a great smile. That must help with stubborn customers." He said it with that syrupy tone men use when they want plausible deniability. I tried to steer us back to business. I walked him through our supplier networks and how our exclusive arrangements allowed us to offer stronger price stability than competitors. He waved a hand. "Listen, sweetheart, I'm here for numbers, not a TED Talk." I paused. "Okay, numbers." I slid our pricing sheet toward him. He glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds before leaning back again. "This is a big order. The adult decision makers will want a better deal." I stared at him. He smiled wider, feeling bold now. "So why don't you do us a favor? Make some coffee and let the grown men handle the details when your legal guy gets here." There was a moment where I considered several options. Option 1, ask him to leave. Option 2, call my father and let Bill do what Bill does best when someone disrespects his family. Option 3, the path that felt like it had been custom built for r/malicious compliance. I chose option 3. I smiled. Coffee, of course. I walked to the break room and made a fresh pot. I even put out the decent cups, not the sad paper ones. I brought a tray back like I was auditioning for a 1950s office training film. Samuel looked pleased with himself. Now that's what I'm talking about. I set the cups down, sat quietly at the table, and opened my notebook. Because here's the thing Samuel didn't know. If you treat the person with the pricing power like a secretary long enough, you get comfortable, and comfortable people talk. He started to monologue the way men like him always do when they think a woman is too decorative to be dangerous. He talked about his company's expansion plan. He talked about how their current supplier in Canada had messed up 2 installs. He talked about delays that were costing them money. He talked about timelines they needed to hit to satisfy their board. He talked about competing quotes, one higher than ours, one lower, but with terrible service history. He talked himself into revealing his true pain points and his real budget ceiling. And I wrote everything down, word for word. Right then, our attorney arrived. His name was Andrew, an international legal specialist with a calm voice, a terrifying brain, and a personal friendship with the overseas company owner. The kind of lawyer who doesn't raise his voice because he doesn't need to. He came in slightly breathless. "Claire, I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." He shook my hand. Not a quick, polite shake, a respectful, professional greeting. Then he turned to Samuel. "Mr. Samuel, apologies for the delay." Samuel froze mid-sip of coffee. I watched the moment the social hierarchy in his head collapse like a folding chair at a family barbecue. Andrew didn't ask who I was. He didn't assume. He addressed me like the person in charge because he already knew exactly who I was. We got started. I slid the updated proposal in front of Samuel. He frowned. "This number's different." "Yes," I said pleasantly. "It's lower for us and still competitive for you." He looked at Andrew, expecting a correction. Andrew gave him none. Samuel cleared his throat. "I thought we were discussing the earlier figure." "We were," I said, "but then you were kind enough to share some details while I was making coffee." His face turned a shade closer to panic. I glanced at my notes. "You mentioned your board timeline requires installation by the end of Q2. You said delays with your current supplier are already costing you penalties. You also said the cheaper competing quote has a service track record you don't trust." Samuel opened his mouth. I kept going. "And you said very clearly that if you could keep the per unit cost under this number, you could get immediate approval." I tapped my pen on the page. He went pale, because he realized what I had done. I hadn't just listened, I had let him hand me the blueprint for exactly how much leverage we had. I leaned forward slightly, still calm. "So here's the good news. We can meet your timeline. We can give you installation priority because of our supplier arrangements. We can provide a stronger warranty package than the cheaper option." I slid a second sheet across, and here's the bad news. That level of priority and coverage comes at a premium. Samuel blinked at the document like it might bite him. This was my favorite part. The malicious compliance wasn't in the coffee. It was in the way I had quietly played the role he assigned me long enough to let him sabotage his own position. He tried to regain control. "With respect, I need to speak with your father." "I understand," I said, "but he authorized me to finalize this agreement today. That's why I'm here." Andrew nodded once. Translation, "This train is leaving with or without your ego on board." Samuel attempted a tactical bluff. "We may need to reconsider our U.S. vendor strategy." I didn't react. Instead, I lifted the page with our supplier letterheads and exclusive terms. "These price points and lead times are already locked for the next 2 production quarters. Our competitors can't match them, not legally and not logistically." He knew enough about this industry to understand what that meant. Suppliers don't offer those terms unless they trust you, and they don't trust you unless you've already proven you can move product without drama. Samuel's confidence was leaking out of him by the second, so I gave him a door. Not an escape, a door. "We can keep the unit price within your approval threshold," I said, "if you agree to the 2-year service commitment and sign for the second wave option now, contingent only on performance benchmarks. In plain English, I get your number, I get my long-term lock." He rubbed his jaw, he looked at Andrew, he looked at me, and then he nodded. We tightened the language, refined the delivery schedule, and standard corporate theater later, Samuel signed. The final price was significantly better for us than the deal he had swaggered in expecting. The margins were healthier, the service agreement was secure, the expansion option gave us projected revenue that made our CFO nearly emotional. When Samuel left, he didn't make eye contact. Andrew packed his briefcase, then he said quietly, "You handled that perfectly." "I just made coffee," I said. He laughed. "Oh, I'm definitely telling Victor." Victor was the overseas owner? And yes, Andrew was the kind of lawyer who absolutely reports behavior, especially when someone embarrasses his client's strategic partner. A week later, we got an email from Victor personally. Warm congratulations, appreciation for our professionalism, enthusiasm for the long-term relationship. And then a single line that was the adult version of a mic drop. Samuel would no longer be representing their company. I didn't dance. I didn't gloat. Okay, that's a lie. I absolutely danced. Not because I enjoy watching people lose their jobs, but because I enjoy watching sexist arrogance meet the exact kind of consequence it assumes will never arrive. Later, I heard through the industry grapevine that Samuel had been on thin ice already. The bad price he'd accepted, the mishandling of the meeting, and most importantly, the report of his behavior toward a co-owner in a sensitive international negotiation had lit the final fuse. Apparently, they were preparing to fire him. He resigned first, which is corporate speak for I tripped right before you shoved me. When I told Dad the full story, he went quiet. I worried I'd stressed him out. Then he said in that raspy voice that still carried decades of authority, "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "You didn't win because you were my daughter." I smiled. "You're right." He pointed at me like I was 12 again, standing in the warehouse with a clipboard. "You won because you're better prepared than the guy who underestimated you." In the months that followed, our relationship with Victor's company became one of our biggest growth drivers. The installs went smoothly. Our service team nailed the response times. We earned trust the slow, old-fashioned way by doing exactly what we promised. And every time I walked past that conference room, I remembered Samuel's face when Andrew greeted me first, the moment he realized the assistant was the person holding the keys to the vault. I made the coffee. I did exactly what he told me to do. And while he was busy enjoying the performance of a woman he thought he could reduce to a stereotype, I took notes. I let him negotiate himself into a corner lined with his own assumptions, his own loose mouth, and his own inability to imagine that the woman in the room might be the one with the final say. Malicious compliance doesn't always look like a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it looks like a polite smile, a fresh pot of coffee, and the quiet sound of a man's career falling apart because he couldn't manage basic respect. And honestly, that's my favorite kind. The most expensive request for coffee in this company, I'm absolutely sure of that. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.